Greetings and welcome back to another iteration of MGTOW Talks. I am here with our friend Coltaine, protector of wombats and slayer of venomous invertebrates. And today the agenda is, or rather our technical sense, the competitive female gaming circuit, or the lack thereof, a further discussion of conflict minerals, and finally, he has some unique insight pertaining to the Bogan Lords of Perth, and you don't need to know who those are just yet, but we'll get to there eventually. So, Coltaine, why don't you start it off, please?
Yeah, well, I guess this kind of sprung up due to comments made by Total Biscuit, which you responded to. I made a video myself. It's
Link in
kind
the
of been
low bar,
a
by the way. It's a very good video. Check it out. Link in the low bar to Coltaine's video. Excuse me. Sorry. Go on.
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that's kind of I guess we've kind of been peripherally talking around the subject for a while. We've had a lot of discussions on the nature of dualism and the idea that thought somehow isn't subject to the same limitations as physical competition. And yeah, it's one of those things where lots of people seem to try and look for some magical politically correct answer to explain the data that we see. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't look good for them. This problem of women in these kind of intellectual pursuits, it's not just modern gaming. Like, it goes back to chess, and as one person pointed out in the comments section to my video, things like snooker as well. There's really no physical barrier to women competing with men in snooker in the way there is in tennis or football. And you can add other things to that as well: poker, Magic the Gathering. As I mentioned to the guy in my comment thread, I used to do trap and skeet shooting, and again, as an Olympic sport, there's a men's and a women's competition, but that sport, when you get down to the brass tacks of it, is really about precision and concentration over a period of time. There's no reason why physical, sexual dimorphism should be a determining factor, and yet the women don't seem to be. First of all, they don't go into those activities of extreme mental exertion, and they don't perform as well once they're there.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important to emphasize, and I think you might have done it, and I don't even remember explicitly referring to the term IQ in that Total Biscuit video, but this isn't just an issue of IQ, and people are unfortunately being misled when they think when we speak of neurology, we're speaking strictly of this abstract IQ. This is about the way our brains are wired, and the way our brains are wired dictates in its totality how we are as people, what we are as people, and specifically with regards to the separate sexes, how we act towards the world, each other, and ourselves. So this isn't, you can have a female with an IQ of 120 and a man with an IQ of 120, and that tells you almost nothing about the direction that they're inclined to go into, their interests, professional or otherwise, and the things they're most likely to pursue, hobbies or, as I said, otherwise. It's not just a question of intelligence, and actually, I don't even think that's the most important factor here, as you just pointed out.
Yeah, well, and I think there's a lot of data to show that as well. One of the things that struck me was somebody in your comment section pointed out the oft-cited social justice statistic that 50% of gamers are women now.
Yes.
50% of games, consumed on the open market are bought by women. The thing is, though, that if if you actually look at the breakdown of what those types of games are, the types of games primarily consumed by the female market are mobile games that are very grindy. You also have problem-solving puzzle games like Candy Crush, lots of Sudoku and things like that. And I mean, they don't like it's not like women that play those games are stupid. Like you know, having a high IQ, being smart, you need to be smart and skillful to play those games. I think the one thing that differentiates the types of video games that the female market on aggregate gravitate towards, and what we would typically refer to as real video games, like the more competitive stuff, is that if you were to describe all of those games, they universally seem to lack an adversarial competitive component.
Yeah.
Like you can be really smart and you're really good at Sudoku, IQ of 120 and tear through Sudoku while sitting on your couch at home. But that is a very different situation to, sitting across the chess table from Bobby Fischer while 100 people look on to see what your next movie is going to be. That's a completely different. And I think it's interesting. I've actually read a number of articles lately. This seems to be kind of like the flavor of the month issue for feminists at the moment. Is that I've read a number of articles from feminists talking about the need to basically ban salary negotiations, because feminists recognize that women are not as aggressive or competitive in salary negotiations compared to men. But somehow they don't make the link from that situation to something like competitive gaming.
If I may, we can get back to the salary negotiation point. One area where there's a reasonably large presence is role-playing games, and it lacks the PvP. I want to talk extensively about PvP in a bit aspect. But even within role-playing games, you can see the kinds of activities women are most likely inclined to. Now, I've made a minor Skyrim mod. I'm not really a modder, but of course I'm aware of the modding scene in Skyrim. It is perhaps one of, in terms of role-playing games, the most modded role-playing game in the world. And there are female modders, but I would say almost to a T, with one or two exceptions, the kinds of mods that women work on are almost invariably aesthetic mods. Houses, homes, not even landscapes, houses, homes. One of the best female sort of female beauty mods, if you will, or revision mods, if you will, was created by a woman her name is Bella as the modder, and it was simply to give women less of a wrinkle, a much more youthful appearance. On the other hand, in the Skyrim modding community, all the technical mods that require programming knowledge, details, quest orientation, all this stuff that really is just you need to keep track of a million different things and really stay focused. With almost no exceptions, and I might be wrong, but I don't think I am. I can only think of male modders, the ones who handle the really technical stuff, which is not to say the artistic stuff isn't technical. We also have a lot of artistic male modders. But the homes and stuff, I've only really seen female modders working on body, facial stuff, and sometimes houses and homes, and occasionally landscape. But all the technical stuff, for example, there's a very prominent mod, most of you have heard of it, those of you who play Skyrim Frostfall, right? By Chesko, a mod which basically makes you feel the weather in Skyrim, the cold. You have to camp, you have to provide shelter for yourself, you have to chop wood, you have to create extracts that will help keep you warm, especially as you go up north. We all know in the north it's very cold. You don't see any of that sort of thing coming from females, which isn't to say they're not capable of doing it, but they clearly have no inclination when you see the vast majority of females making, say, home or house mods and improving female facial features. But one interesting thing I've noted about role-playing games is it is possible to create a larger female gaming demographic. One of the most famous or infamous companies, if you will, to do this is BioWare, a company that is transmuted itself into something that's barely recognizable to former fans. But we certainly see they're catering to the sensitivities of women, people who tend to be more, women and generally tend to be more offended more often, that they have probably the largest female gaming demographic of any sort of game. But coming to
I would say amongst the AAA gamers.
precisely amongst AAA gamers, when it comes to PvP, it's a very different story, very different animal. And I'm not even someone who, I mean, I do play one PvP game fairly fanatically, Ghost Recon Phantoms. Everyone knows my gaming channel, Stardust LP. You'll know it, but even if you don't play it. But there are women. I have a very talented, skillful player in my clan. She is a Croatian female. There are a few others that are pretty good, but I'm talking about counting on one hand compared to the thousands and hundreds of extremely skillful, competent male players. And so this isn't a question of IQ. There are differences, it seems, or rather, it is apparent in IQ distribution, but that's not the focus of this. It's the fact that men and women are inclined to very different things, and we need to create an understanding as to why that's the case. And I don't think it's all been socialized into us is a very good explanation, and I don't think it accounts for the data that we have on hand. Please.
Well, for the most part, I haven't even heard people explicitly say it's been socialized into us. I mean, one of the most annoying things that I've found about this debate is that when you talk about, the good female players in Ghost Recon or CSGO or Dota or something like that, the response that you invariably get is that the reason that there's so few good female players is because there's so few female players at all. And
Right.
To me, that is a really annoying argument because it gets us no closer to an understanding of why. Like simply saying there are less good female players because there are less female players doesn't tell us why more females don't enter into the activity. And I think the focus on IQ is somewhat problematic for the reason that I actually have several friends that are well into the Counter-Strike, Dota, and Team Fortress scene. I've got a couple of friends that really get into Path of Exile and stuff like that too. They're really into min-maxing, and it's their primary hobby. They spend hours a day playing these games, but none of them are really geniuses. Like they love doing it, and they spend the time to try and better their skills and understand the aspects of the game, but none of them have any illusions that they'd be able to go to like the Dota World Championship and win. The differences in IQ at the top end that often get talked about. I mean, or even not even at the top end. I mean, if we take Turd Flinging Monkeys, his video,
Probably his best one to date, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic video. But if we were to take his position and say that position is correct, men are smarter, get over it. That to me will explain why you don't see women in the very top end, why they're not competitive at that level. But it doesn't tell you why there is.
We're talking now about IQ, but with gaming, we're also talking about motor reflex. We're talking about maybe very different animals here. Let's not conflate them too much.
This is the thing, is that so much gets put on IQ, but I don't think, like, IQ might be a limiting factor at the high end of gaming when you need to micromanage a Zerg army, but I don't think that IQ is the barrier, is a barrier to entry at the recreational level that most of my friends play at. So the question is, what other factors are involved at the recreational level that make men take up this activity, orders of magnitude more than women,
and indeed excel, even if they're not the top end of the top end. Now, I have some ideas regarding this. Now, I play with people for Ghost Recon Phantoms that are just vastly better than I am. Those of you who don't know the game, the different ranking systems. I tend to be a low-end General 5, which is the highest general ranking there is, but I'm on the lower end usually. It's rare that I hit the middle and extremely rare I hit the top, and when I do it, I'm not consistent. Now, I play with a bunch of people, and I say this not out of arrogance, just based off observation. I think I'm clearly more intelligent than some of the top players I play with, just in terms of intellectual ability or whatever. They blow me out of the water, and there are a number of reasons for this. For one thing, I started playing this game in my late 30s. I don't have the motor reflexes of a young person. It was the first official shooter I ever played. This all contributed. And despite that, through practice and hard work, though I have no natural inclination, I worked my way up through the ranks for the most part. But I would argue the same kind. A PvP shooter requires immense motor control. You need to have really good reflexes. It helps when you're young, and I do think it helps a great deal when you're male. The same kinds of things that contribute to greater male athleticism in a more overt sport could, on a much more microscopic level, contribute to greater male ability in a PvP shooter, where really all you have is your reflexes, your intuition. And these guys that I play with, they do things I just couldn't. They just run across the battlefield, just blowing people away, and I could never do that unless I get a really lucky day. And I think it's not just as physical ability is not as overt as we're running track, men out, or in your case, the fantastic example of Venus Williams versus the German seeded 250 and then later at 350 tennis player. It really does come down to motor control as well. I mean, how fast can you react in some of these games? And I don't know a whole lot about League of Legends. I don't really follow it. But I imagine many of those kind of split decisions that require, clicking the right thing at the right time, whatever the strategies involved, will inevitably come into play in this regard as well.
Well, I would add to that as well, like your ability to handle stress in a situation.
Yeah.
In the video that I made, I included a clip of Robert Sapolsky talking about the fact that if you've got two people sitting at a table moving wooden pieces around, but if these two people are having a grandmaster chess tournament, chances are that their blood pressure is right up there with marathon runners. Heart rate is up. Stress levels, and there's so many factors beyond IQ. I actually had this idea, and I think I'm going to make an amendment, just a short amendment to my video, so that if you watch it and then the next one is there, you'll be able to see it. But I had this idea while I was making the video that IQ is a very good baseline measurement for cognitive ability. But much like the way, genetics, you have your genome, which is like the baseline of information. Then you have epigenetics on top of that basically regulates, through DNA methylation and histones and stuff, certain genes are expressed or suppressed. I had this idea that perhaps with IQ, you could have two people that score the same IQ on paper in a controlled condition, but then there are environmental and physiological conditions that change the way that IQ is expressed, kind of like an epi-intelligence, for example. I guess the chess one about physiology and blood pressure is a bit more abstract, but I mean a simpler, clearer example would be getting inebriated. Like I'm a relatively smart guy. I can do things like I can play a little bit of guitar. If I have 8 beers, that skill completely goes out the window. I possess that skill, but given the situation of inebriation, I can't perform that skill properly.
Not only that, you mentioned long stretches of concentration. For example, when I'm playing GRP, that's Ghost Recon Phantoms, I found the tendency almost invariably when I play more than 3 intense games, I start playing like shit. That's because I just notice it requires my attention. I'm of course older, and so I have that against me. But and others can go on longer. But my attention span drops, my concentration levels drop, and I start making a lot more mistakes. So actually, to keep up my peak performance, what I usually do is I play 3 games, and then there are a couple of hours break in between, and then it's the same, and I repeat it. And I think when you look at the kinds of things that are required of competitive gamers, from what I understand, and I've read up on it extensively in the last few days, and we're talking about not just full-time jobs, we're talking about, people sitting in front of a computer 16, 18 hours a day just
Yeah.
practicing. I've also
Yeah, I
talked
mean,
in the past to professional Counter-Strike players, and it all sounds like fun and glamour, but it's very rigorous, it's very draining,
well,
and sorry, go
not
on.
even that, just some of the, I guess you would call it performance enhancing drugs surrounding it too. Like, I knew a couple of guys that they weren't pro in the sense that they, win the world championship or anything at Counter-Strike, but they were very competitive. And if you went to a LAN party with them, they'd basically be, chewing down caffeine pills, washing it down with Red Bull. Like,
Yeah.
this is the things that people do in the competitive gaming scene to maintain that competitive edge over 6 hours.
Yeah, yeah, because it's not. I mean, it's you really, as I said, I'm an extreme example, being very old, but my ability to concentrate just dropped. Whereas if I'm running across the tundras of Skyrim, I don't really need to concentrate as much. It's not. I'm not playing against other players, smart players who are doing all sorts of complicated moves. It's not. It's not the same thing, and I think this is something we see also in the professional world. I mean, women women professionally tend not to get in the fields that require massive amounts of hours and massive amounts of concentrated hours, and we see this in particular. I mean, there was a guy in the comment section who was ranting on about all sorts of things, how there are studies disproving this and debunking this. But I don't know if you or other people are familiar with the Norwegian film. I believe it's called Hirnvask, which I believe is well, it's brainwashing.
Brainwash.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a 6-part series, I think,
Yeah.
hosted
Produced
by
by a Norwegian comedian.
Idra or Ida something. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was like a.
In any
But
event,
yeah,
he
fantastic series.
he interviews various male professionals in engineering as well as nursing. I mean, Norway is among, if not the most quote unquote gender egalitarian society on earth. And this has been said and spoken of, and I've added links in the past on this, but let's mention it again because it's very important. In the most gender egalitarian countries of the world, what you see is not more women gravitating to things like engineering and quote unquote hard sciences, but to the things that they naturally seem to gravitate to: more nursing, more early child education, these sorts of things. Where you see more female engineers are, in Middle Eastern countries, places like China, where it's just fight, bite, and get yourself up into the economy, and they're willing to do shit. They don't enjoy it though. You know,
India in particular,
India.
lots of IT women in IT in India,
Yeah,
and it's not because it's necessarily what they want to do. It's because that's
precisely.
the jobs available
Which
in
is
India.
the point I'm making, and I think it's been confused, and perhaps you were making this point, but it's not that anyone is claiming that women can't do this stuff, but women are not naturally inclined to do this stuff. They can do it, obviously, on some
Yeah.
level. They might not be at the top end, and that's a entirely different debate. But I'm sure they can do an adequate job at a basic level. They don't want
Yeah.
to do this
Well,
stuff.
yeah, it's a Norwegian gender equality paradox. On that topic in particular, I actually had one of my best friends is married to a nurse, ultra feminist girl. So I don't know if she actually recognized the implications of what
Is
she was
this the
saying.
psychologist chap?
No,
Sorry.
this is my engineer friend,
Right.
mechanical engineer.
Right.
But he's married to a nurse, and yeah, she told me this one time, and I found it amazing. And to be honest, like she told me this, and I haven't actually looked into it any further. So this is somewhat anecdotal, but she was telling me that despite the fact that nursing is overwhelmingly female dominated, something like a 9-to-1 ratio or something in general, as you start getting into the more specialized subfields like theater nurse and intensive care nurse,
Trauma
the
nurse,
numbers
yeah.
actually, they start actually getting closer and closer to 50-50. So even though that's a a radically female dominated profession, as you start getting into technically specialized
And
subfields,
more stressful ones.
yeah, the men seem to, proportionally, the men seem to strive further in those subfields.
Yeah, and I think another, once again, it's the stress factor as well. I mean, women. Obviously, this has been debunked. Zeus knows how many times, but the gender pay gap. Women
Mm.
prefer to have more free time, and actually, I think it's
Yep.
pretty smart. I prefer to have more free time too. But men are
Yep.
much more inclined to take on high stress, high hour jobs, and you see this at the high, apparently, I guess, in the highest end of nursing as well. Men are more willing to accommodate those stress levels,
Yep.
and women are less so. Women are more concerned about their own health. They take better care of themselves. All these things that men tend to neglect about themselves. And let's face it, being a competitive, I don't know, League of Legends player, chugging down Red Bulls and popping caffeine pills, that's not exactly what we would consider a healthy and a regimented diet. So, you know, the kinds of thing that's risk taking essentially. I mean, engaging in narcotic consumption, narcotics, and I mean caffeine pills and Red Bull in excess. That those are definitely narcotics. That
Well, I, I mean, going back to what I said before, I think a lot of these things could essentially come back to, in a broad sense, risk aversion. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
it's an avoidance of, like I said, like with you look at the games that are predominantly consumed by women, um, they're puzzle solving. They're mobile puzzle solvers where you rack up points on your own. They're not really
Or
very
Sims.
adversarial. Yeah,
Sims
well,
get
again,
along.
like it's
Yeah.
grinding, yeah, getting along. I was looking at a graphic just before we had this talk about a breakdown of mobile games, and it was showing which mobile games, men and women mostly played, and men were sort of shooters, strategy. Women were, card games, puzzle games, um, you know, social games. There's a pretty clear divide that you can look at, and that divide seems to be which games are adversarial and which games are kind of just
Yeah.
more solitary
And
problem solvers and things.
we have to try to account for that rather than merely shrug our shoulders and say, well, we just don't know. I'm often
Mm.
puzzled by people who pose the question of gender differences along the lines of something like abiogenesis, where we really just don't know how life got off the ground, and then say,
Mm.
well, it's the same mystery when it comes to differences between men and women. But I mean, the question, this has been talked about, Girl Writes What, by me, by dozens of people by now, but why are women more risk averse? Well,
Mm.
we have to understand people that just cannot fathom this because it seems so far removed that ultimately virtually all of our behavior comes back down to what was selected for by selection pressures and what
Mm.
was reproductively advantageous. Women do not benefit from neck and neck cutthroat competition in the same sense that men do. They certainly compete in the sense of beauty pageants, but that's the whole point because men prioritize youth and beauty and symmetry, whereas women prioritize that as well, but they have to obviously partition their interests, genetic fitness and resource acquisition.
Yeah,
And
and I mean
so,
it's yeah, I mean, and that's not just those types of activities as well. I mean, I ride a motorcycle, and yeah, I mean, you don't meet that many female. They're out there, but you don't actually meet that many female motorcycle riders. It's not a safe form of
well,
transport.
particularly in light of your hit and run incident, no, I mean, and, and
Yeah.
and here's proof in the pudding. Coltaine was a victim of a hit and run, and he's going back to his motorcycle in spite of it. So,
Yeah. Well, different motorcycle. The last one got totaled.
yeah, well, yeah. Whereas I'm pretty sure that a woman who might have been a motorcycle enthusiast, depending on who she is, might have said, "Well, I'll take." I certainly would have thought twice about it. But then I'm actually a relatively risk averse male. I just don't see the point, particularly since I'm not competing for women. But I think understanding that is really the key to understanding why people behave the way they do. Women just don't benefit from that kind of rough competition, intense competition that men do. I mean, the only thing they would be able to say is a parade around is, oh, we have a woman who's number one Dota, whatever. and thus it's not particularly interesting to them. And
Mm.
as you said,
Well,
most of us are not pro gamers, but on some level we enjoy the competition. I wouldn't play GRP if on some level I didn't enjoy competing and shooting
yeah.
people in the head and being better.
That said, I think I would actually say there are benefits in that regard. The whole gamer girl thing, and like the what's that show? Uh,
Yeah, but
Annoying
Coltaine,
show about the physicists.
yeah, gamer girl is. Let's be clear about something. The whole. I mean, this has been widely discussed. In fact, that long podcast that Total Biscuit had with Twitch streamers. Gamer being a gamer girl in of itself is a boon, particularly if you look relatively good. There's one gamer girl who presents a kind of quote unquote normal air. I'm trying to remember her name. It doesn't occur to me right now, but she's a relatively large channel, and she's not particularly skillful, and she doesn't really say anything insightful, but she's attractive and she plays games, and I think she's legitimately enthusiastic about most games. And so yeah, this is there's no benefit to being competitive, but there's certainly benefit in being involved, precisely because as a female in the gaming world, you don't need to be as competitive to draw attention to yourself. If you look good, in the most extreme examples, you have what the so-called boob streamers on Twitch who, through a combination of cleavage and other assets, accrue donations and viewers and money. But it's that in itself is not competition. So do women benefit from being involved in gaming? Of course they do, but not in the same sense that men, I would argue.
No, but I was just kind of getting to the fact that I mean, being involved, the show that I remember, the show Big Bang Theory. There's a number of scenes in that where they're in the local comic book shop, and female walks in and all the guys are gaga over her. And I to some extent, I mean, I see that with female bike riders as well. Bike guys who are into bikes love seeing a girl on a bike. And when they do get a bit competitive, I mean, you look at Toss Girl, for example. I mean, she, outside of the female leagues, she didn't really achieve anything too major, but yeah, she had an awful lot of parade and fanfare around her, simply for being moderately competitive as a woman in that scene.
Well, exactly. That's my point. They don't need to do, women generally speaking, as long as they look decent, don't need to do as much. Melanie Mack, by the way, is the name of this gamer. It's a very generic channel. I think she is a real gaming enthusiast. She's not one of these, I'm just showing off boobs, although she does show off some stuff sometimes. But yeah, their mere presence, assuming they look good. And even in the case of, this isn't even competitive gaming, there's one girl, I don't know, her name is Ashley. Anyway, she's basically a BioWare spokesperson. She's very unattractive. She's overweight, but she does relatively good video composition, puts things together in compilation. And I mean, she got a huge boost with BioWare. She visited the studios. So just being a female in of itself can often just be an asset in gaming, even if you don't look good, because you're representing quote unquote minorities and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Whereas, as you just pointed out, I mean, we are millions of kind of grunt gamers. We're not professional gamers, and we never will be, but we still enjoy playing the games we play. And to get to the cream of the crop, I mean, you have to really just have obviously natural talent for these sorts of things, and work in the combination of working your ass off, and that's how you get noticed as a man. You don't get.
Yeah.
It's a completely, and of course this reduces back to biology and what have you. And what I'm just most puzzled by is that Total Biscuit would take the time to, as it were, ask out loud such questions. Is it a social issue? Is it a cultural issue? And as if maybe he is genuinely interested, I don't know, and then sort of never take the time to research it or even converse with people who may have actually
Yeah.
taken the time to check it out. And that puzzles me,
Yeah,
I have to
look,
say.
I think probably a few people in your comment section kind of nailed it. I mean, the guy's subscribed to Karen's channel. I've seen him comment over there that he likes her stuff. I can't imagine that he'd watch Karen's videos and then, not have some understanding of what's really going on. My suspicion is he probably gets it, but due to publicity reasons, he probably can't say out loud and not have it affect his online presence.
Yeah. I mean, and seems to be the eternal dilemma in any sort of modern media situation. I certainly don't seek fame and glory, but I would like, ideally, for some healthy dose of reason and a willingness to compromise the barrier of political correctness in the mainstream. And I'm not going to be the person to deliver that. I'm tiny and always will be, by dint of the nature of my material. Whereas Total Biscuit, he's taking the time to ask these questions, and maybe he knows the answers now, but at the end of the day, he's a businessman, and he's there to make money for himself by playing games and giving game recommendations. And I don't fault him for that. It's not his purview, but I think we should. It's not a problem to begin with, which was the main point of my video. It's this whole we need to have X amount of women. It's the same thing as we need to have X amount of women in STEM. Now, speaking of STEM. I did want to talk about this, as I mentioned before. STEM isn't STEM. Of course, there are hordes of women involved in biology professionally. That seems to taper off when you talk about abstract geometry. Is it simply because they're not being encouraged to do so? I mean, it's ludicrous.
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know enough about what happens in biology. I was aware that biology is probably, I think last time I looked, it was about 65% female or something. The people getting degrees, but I mean, I would actually be, and I haven't looked at this, I don't know what the stats actually are, but I would actually be curious to see if, as you move up the chain of academia, through your undergraduate to your postgraduate, master's, PhD, and the stuff that the percentage of stuff that's actually being published at the PhD level, does it level out the way nursing does?
I have no idea, but that's something that we almost certainly should investigate. It could be a very interesting topic, but but my point, of course, since we're both ignorant of that particular aspect, is that STEM fields, you have STEM and then you have STEM. Biology is a science, but it's not a hard abstract science. And I think once again we see the trend of. I'd argue that the average woman of comparable or identical IQ, the average man, she could perform mathematical tasks more or less at the same level. She's just not really inclined to. And this is the major problem, that there's some of these feminists. This was hysterical. This actually took place in your homeland of Oz. There was some debate, and there were feminists, and there was one pseudo American British PhD. I think she was a forensic scientist, but she had worked as a sex worker in London. And she posed this question, this feminist, what if your daughter said she wanted to be a sex worker? I'd be horrified. And then it went on and said, well, why aren't you, about women in science, why aren't you pursuing physics? And the feminist kind of sat there a bit nonplussed and, well, I guess I'm not interested, which kind of answers the whole debate. It's not even a debate. It's just silly. And it seems that people are just running around in circles concerning this issue, be it gaming or the professions or whatever. And, as long as they're eschewing the actual facts and the actual differences between men and women, it's non-productive. So why bother talking about it?
Well, I mean, this is something that I might actually read this section of a comment from, like, another person left a comment on your Total Biscuit video, and they ended their comment by saying, what are you suggesting? We just try not to grow the community, try not to find the unique competitive girl that are capable of playing at a competitive level. No, that's absurd. The current state is not problematic, but it's not ideal. I'm like, it's not our responsibility to try and get more girls into gaming or any other profession, for example, for that matter. Yeah. If girls want to if girls want to enter the gaming scene, there's nothing really, like there's no sort of like, misogynist Gestapo stopping them from doing it.
No.
They're not as interested in. I know this is something that I I found interesting back in the days of the atheist online community as well, because it was very much a male-dominated community, and you used to hear people like Matt Dillahunty complain about the fact that we need to try and change to make ourselves more appealing to get more women in, and I'm like, it's like just because there aren't as many women doesn't necessarily mean the movement is sexist. It could just mean they're not as interested in these kind of philosophical pursuits.
Yeah, and this is another. It's not it's not ideal, but what is ideal?
Yeah.
I don't want to go off on a tangent, but and actually we can kind of segue slowly but surely into the conflict mineral thing. But I mean, life. There's absolutely nothing fair in life. Nothing is fair in life. We can try to make a pretense of how we can establish, a fair trial or fair competition, but given the amount of variables that we are not the authors of, it's just. So, is it fair? For example, as in the study you sent me, I'm aware that tall people tend to be more intelligent than shorter people. Well, no, but that seems to be what the data are telling us.
Yeah.
And Barbarossa made a rather salient point, I think, in pointing out that in all likelihood, low testosterone men are probably not going to be as aggressive salary negotiators. Should we set up a stipend for them, and should we support them as well? And should we put on tall, high testosterone men on lockdown? It's a complicated issue, and it's not an it's not so much that it's incorrigible, because I don't actually see this as a problem. Whereas I actually do see the conflict mineral issue as a it's a real problem. People are suffering, but
Yeah.
not having enough women gamers or women in, I don't know, in electrical engineering. This is just silliness. And
Yeah.
either we talk about the causes and the fact that given these causes, there is no solution because it's not a problem to begin with, or people, in my opinion, should just shut the fuck up about it.
Yeah. Well, I think the difference between those two things is that one of those things is people, as less women are choosing to partake in this activity. What are we going to do? Well, I don't think we should do anything if women don't want to do it.
Precisely.
You basically, I mean, say you do force more women into it, are they going to be happy doing those hobbies? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's something that they're interested in. Why do you want to force people into something that they don't want to do? But the problem with the conflict minerals is that there seems to be, the conflict minerals seems to be a much more delicate balancing act of adversarial needs. As you pointed out in your video, conflicts of interest, where on the one hand you can say, conflict minerals are bad. I don't want to buy anything that contains them anymore. I need to be more ethical. But does that mean you're going to forego a mobile phone and potentially a source of income and sustenance as a Westerner?
Now, supposedly, there have been, Intel, for example, claims very soon to be completely conflict-free, and other companies have taken initiative as well. But it's just, there have been attempts at developing technology, but it tends to be expensive. There's no way to completely trace sources. So inevitably, there's going to be some exchange of conflict minerals. Now, take someone, this is just a hypothetical thought experiment, but I love such things. Someone like Gopher's vids. You might have heard of Gopher. He's a very popular sort of mod Skyrim guy primarily. Yeah. He grew exponentially, and I would argue he has some of the best gamer YouTube Patreon support as well. He's beloved of the people, if you will. And I think he's a good guy. He's helped me out on a few occasions, and he's kind of a nice family guy, that kind of sort of person.
Yeah.
This nice family guy. What if he discovered that he's all about his technology? His technology, massive technology that the circuit board would X amount of people, I'm just making this up, died as a result, and we can actually trace it back to this conflict in this particular year, and blah blah blah, and it's likely ongoing. Is he as good a nice a guy as he is? He's going to drop everything, and I can't conscious this anymore. I don't think so. I mean, we're all ultimately very selfish. There are exceptions. I mean, Doctors Without Borders. There's this project called the Enough Project, and the guy who heads it or started it has been involved in African conflict for over 25 years. These are anomalies. These are not normal people. I'm a normal, selfish bastard, and
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I'm willing to let people suffer, so I can talk here with you on Skype. Because in the hierarchy, and I wish I had actually added a graphic, but you're much better at such things. I talked about primary interest, relatability or relatedness, visibility and distance, and these are
Are you familiar with the monkey sphere or Dunbar's number?
no, I'm not actually. Please enlighten me.
As a I think he was a primatologist or some type of biologist. Was his name possibly Robert Dunbar?
It rings a bell, but you'd have to explain further, please.
Basically, he drew he drew a correlation between the number, basically the size of the brain, the neocortex, and the number, like the group size of different types of monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a fairly consistent number across different species of monkeys, gorillas, chimpanzees, capuchin monkeys, etc. And he extrapolated that out to Homo sapiens and basically worked out that the number of people in your life that you can actually, as a human being, the number of people that you can conceptualize as individual people is about 150. That's your monkey sphere. And as you get closer to your personal friends and family, for instance, if you like a family member or close friend dies, you're devastated, you're upset. If an acquaintance who's a close friend of another friend dies, for example, you'll be upset, but it will be more that you're upset for your friend's loss. And as you get further and further out from your immediate monkey sphere, the emotional empathy that you feel for these people gets... Yeah, basically once you cross that threshold of 150, you just you don't really think of people as people anymore. It's like there's a plumber, there's an electrician.
Right. Well, it rather starkly reminds me of the famous Stalin quote that one man's death is a tragedy, millions of deaths are just a statistic, and I think that plays very strongly on this monkey sphere. But absolutely, it's. I mean, part of it is, I do think, the out of sight, out of mind factor. And, this was brought up in the commentaries, but this is documented, and there's a lot of evidence to support this. The opposition to the Vietnam War came not as a result of, people suddenly having some sort of ethical enlightenment and being opposed to needless war, but they saw the visuals, they saw the images. For the first time, you had images,
the body bags,
journalism,
on TV.
and in some case mutilations of men being brought back, or for that matter, I'm going to be talking about this eventually in a video, the My Lai, where these American soldiers kind of opened fire, raped, killed, pillaged this entire village. It was so graphic for the first time, and actually since then the U.S. government has learned its lesson. Most of these sort of mock news stations like CNN and Fox 5, the last era where we actually had real graphical presentation of war as it is was almost certainly the Vietnam War, and you can still find it, but this is not mainstream because the U.S. government learned its lesson. They said, well, shit, all these guys are showing the people what's happening. We can't have this. And so it's sort of hush, hush, hush. But obviously there are people who do get involved in this stuff. But I think as you said, as you put it, I'm intrigued to have learned about this monkey sphere and the 150 number. But this seems fairly accurate, and it goes in hand with what Stalin once said. I'm hardly an admirer of Stalin, mind you. I'm just saying
No,
it lines
but
up with what he said. We care about what is in our immediate sphere, although immediate sphere can be relative. I mean, it's not just what's directly in front of your eyes.
no,
Obviously, I have friends such as yourself that I care about online. I've never actually physically met, but I enjoy conversing with you, and we have great conversations. But obviously, on some level, there's gonna be a limit, and it is a
I
tragedy though that we can't find a way around it. That these
yeah,
countries necessarily have to be exploited.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think one way of putting it would be, I mean, if you think about the amount of emotional strings that need to be pulled in a piece of fiction like a movie,
Mm.
you have to watch a 2 hour movie, and certain emotional strings have to be pulled to get you to empathize with the character in a movie, to make you think about these characters as individual people with personalities and interests and preferences. I mean, if you see you know a couple of seconds of people working in mines in the DRC, on the news, I mean, do you psychologically see them as anything other than like NPCs in Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah,
Like, do you actually think about these people as people? And I would say probably not. I mean, you're not given sufficient insight to actually empathize. I mean, if you stop and think about it for hard enough, you can be like, yeah, working in those conditions would be horrible. But I think if you're just channel surfing through the news, I don't think that's there's no chance to actually empathize there.
it's a very good point, and I think one of the main reasons you do have people like this guy whose name I forget, who started up the Enough Project. I mean, when you're actually been involved with people, you hear their stories. I think
Mm.
you're almost certainly more inclined towards sympathy or empathy in some cases, and it's a very very different thing. And the same
Mm.
thing applies to the rainforest. I talked about that as
Mhm.
well. That I'm someone I'm very big on ecology. I love my fellow primates, my especially gorillas and orangutans. They're my favorites amongst the primates, but even more so than humans. But I can't in good conscience say, well, this guy in Borneo who's scraping by, chopping down trees. Now, fuck him. We need to have the orangutans there. I'd like to have the orangutans there, but a lot of the primarily left leaning and sort of politically correct stuff comes out of it. What are we? You need to present some sort of alternative. You can't tell these guys who are dirt poor villagers for the most part, well, this is going to have vast implications or serious implications in the ecosystem. And did you know we're 96% related to orangutans, and look how human they are. And they don't care about
Mm.
that. In fact, these guys
No.
are clubbing mothers to get orangutans to death and leaving orphans alone to be salvaged by certain organizations. It's it's a dog eat dog world, and there is a perpetual conflict of interest that is going to be present in every genre of human action, be it
Yeah.
ecology, and even in the
Well,
MGTOW sphere. We've talked about the commercialization versus, you know, we've talked about this.
yeah, yeah. Well, going back to your point on the rainforest though, and interests, and that there are certain altruistic people, some of whom are
Hmm.
particularly on the left, and they love to get up on their moral high horses. I mean, there are so many interconnected variables beneath the surface though, that you can't, like, I think a lot of the time it's these people saying, oh, we need to save the rainforest, don't actually recognize some of their I mean, I eat meat. I don't have a problem with eating meat. I'll skip over vegetarians because I honestly don't think you can be an ethical vegetarian and just go straight to the extreme end of veganism.
Hmm.
Um, do you know what the primary cause of deforestation in the Amazon is these days?
I'm actually not aware, though. If we were told, if I were to listen to the news, it would be cattle ranching, right, and the
Mm-mm.
creation of
Soy plantation.
interesting.
It, you know, it's great that you're not eating meat anymore, but do you know where your tofu and your soy milk is coming from?
I had
Yeah,
actually heard about this. Thanks for
yeah,
confirming that. Okay.
yeah. The number one cause of deforestation in Brazil and stuff these days is actually soy plantations. Like, I really don't think that you can make your way through life without leaving some kind of destructive
The
footprint.
footprint, yeah, yeah. No,
Um,
absolutely. Vegans, of course, are amongst the worst. I mean, particularly the ones who try to transform veganism into some sort of science. I mean, I've seen people talk about spend a vast amount of
Banana
time
girl.
talking about, well, not just your friend Banana Girl over in Oz. I mean, she's a lunatic essentially, but other people who claim that human dentition is
Mm,
actually that of a frugivore, an animal that exclusively eats fruit, and that
mm,
the hundreds of thousands of years of hominid and Homo sapiens history and the vast geographical distances between different groups of humans, all not engaging in frugivorous, if you will, activity. This is all just, I don't know. They
mm.
just got it all wrong.
Yeah,
It's very strange. But I mean,
yeah,
it it is, I think, an absolute. We have to just be honest about the impossibility of 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 setting all things right, and it is possible to do really great things. I mean, I've heard stories of random people giving kidneys to strangers in need. And in that
yeah.
case, I just think, some people are less selfish than others. And so, yeah, that does exist. But
I probably I probably tend to agree with Dr. Gregory House that if somebody does something like that, there's probably an underlying
well, yeah,
biological
I mean,
cause for their
there are
crazy. But
people who get off. I mean, get an ego trip. I mean, helping people out
mm,
and heading down to the rainforest and talking
mm,
to the rape victims and the relatives of murder victims in Congo. Okay, but you know,
yeah,
e-
and I get all of that, but I think with these complicated things, you're always going to get down to a point where there is a conflict of interest, and you're not going to be able to help everyone.
right, right.
Um, I know you don't watch much anime.
No,
Um,
I do not.
there was an anime, and I know there's a few anime watchers in the audience. There was an anime from the 90s called Trigun or Trigun, and the main character in that is just an absolute pacifist, and that gets him into some dilemmas throughout the series. And there's one part where he has, towards the end of the series, he has a flashback to his childhood, and it's basically a scene where he sees a butterfly caught in a spider's web, and he has a real dilemma because does he save the butterfly from being eaten, in which case the butterfly lives, but then the spider will starve. Um, there are some things of innate conflict that you just can't resolve.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
is nature. Nature is a terrifying, destructive force when you get down to it. Things eat each other, and yeah, there's
And at the
not.
same time, I mean, this reminds me. There's this remarkable Argentinian photographer who's still doing it, I imagine, who
Mm,
photographs and records the activities of the orca, these transient orcas that live off the coast. And these orcas are famous for their extremely intelligent strategy of intentionally beaching themselves in order to get seals to eat them. And these
mm,
same orcas that are tearing seals apart and whatever, they're friends with this guy. They respond
mm.
to him calling them names. They'll beach themselves in order to engage in tactile contact with them, and it's absolutely fascinating. But then we see the same phenomenon with the way internecine tribes at war will treat their own kin, very gently and compassionately, and then
Mm,
and stab the guy 20 times down the road because he's not part
mm.
of it, and so it's
Well, I
inevitable.
mean, humans as well. I mean, even modern Western civilized humans will, take their kid to the petting zoo and get to play with the goats and stuff, and then go home for roast lamb.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I saw recently a documentary on horse meat, which I actually like. I just haven't had in a long time in France, and how this father was, teaching his daughter to ride the horse and whatever.
Mm,
And she was asked, she was only about 10 or 11, so So you have no problem riding this horse and then eating it for dinner later. She says, oh, nope.
Yeah, there's kind of a thing in Australia because I mean I grew up actually in more of a dairy farming area, but there was some people I knew that had cows, and I know a few people that had that have the story that they had a pet cow, and then one day the cow went to live on a farm, and they had an overabundance of beef for the next 2 months.
Yeah, and on a final note, not just regarding conflict minerals, but the nature of human conflict and conflicts of interest. If we specifically talk about MGTOW related issues or gender related issues, we can see that I've talked about this many times that there is a conflict of interest on a macroscopic scale in terms of resources in society and allocation of resources. The tendency is for women to get more stuff than men. One, because limiting factor in reproduction, and that's all instinctual, but they also petition the government more. They're more willing to ask for these things. Men just kind of take it. We tend to take it up the ass, and
Well, I think that happens at an aggregate level because even on an individual level, men and women have radically different reproductive interests.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, probably should put a link in the low bar to this as well, but the Sapolsky lectures are very good.
I've done that before.
Laying a lot of
I've
these.
recommended it. Actually, talking about the one who first put me onto them was the High Lord of Biochemistry, and I've watched probably all of them twice. It's very dense, though. I mean, it's the Sapolsky lectures. You need to really pay attention, especially when you get into some of the neurotransmitter stuff. But yeah, it's really just a wealth of knowledge, and it's quite fascinating. But yeah, I mean, people in denial about conflicting interests between men and women. I mean, how can in the mating game, right? In the mating game, men and women have very different reproductive strategies, and one is trying to optimize his over the others, and vice versa. It just so happens these days, given social conventions that are due to biological proclivities, that women tend to have the upper hand. That's especially true of contractual marriage, although whoever does that shit anymore.
Yeah.
I think we've covered the conflict mineral issue and conflict of interest issue sufficiently. On a final note, Coltaine added a very interesting comment to my most recent video on dialects and sociolects, and I do plan on very, very soon, anon, to be putting out a continuation of that video. I'm sorry it got interrupted or cut off. This seems it shall remain a mystery of the universe. I don't know what happened. But in any event, I talked about Australia and how it tends to be more sociolectical than dialectical due to its youth as a country, as a nation state. And I was not aware of this specifically, but apparently, why don't you tell us about the Bogan Perth Lords, as I call them, Coltaine?
Yeah, well, there's actually a term in, I guess you hear it occasionally other places, but it's big in Western Australia, called cubs or cashed up bogans. There's an interesting thing in Western Australia where there is such a prolific mining and petroleum industry there that there's an overabundance of very low skill entry positions that pay really well, and as a result, the middle class in Perth doesn't necessarily reflect their socioeconomic upbringing. To give you an example, I mean, I had some friends working in Karratha and Exmouth, and one of them was basically getting paid $100 an hour just to wash dump trucks.
Just hose them down with water.
Just hosing them, well, like high pressure spray hoses. But yeah, she was cleaning dump trucks and getting $100 an hour for it. That's the skill level involved there versus the income that's insane. You're probably in one of the top earning brackets for average Australians there.
Yeah. It actually sounds like not a bad job.
The job has its upsides and its downsides. I mean, Exmouth is a bit of a shithole to live in. I mean, people out there often, they work fly in, fly out. So they go out there for 2 weeks and then fly back to Perth for a week. A lot of people there are kind of living in shipping containers that have basically just got a bed, a TV, and an air conditioning unit. So they're not the trade. The pay is very good, but the trade-off is living conditions. It wouldn't be like
Yeah, yeah.
So there's trade-offs, but yeah, there's a lot of people there, a lot of guys. Their families in Perth, and they go to work in the mines. And some of them, I mean, if they're out on the rigs, for example, again, you don't need. There are jobs that you can do out there that don't need a high level of professional skill and training. Some people on rigs are getting $150,000 a year. Which for an untrained profession is pretty damn good.
Well, I think this is part of the larger picture of something I've seen. Of course, this is very specific to Western Australia, but it used to be back in the day that education was tightly linked to socioeconomic status. With the inception of the internet and people making tons of money off of the internet, this is changing. You see people of very low educational background and even low income becoming YouTube giants or internet giants in general. And yeah, the internet in a way is a game changer and has really changed the notion of what a sociolect is and how how even education is tied into different means of speaking. And I do plan on covering this more extensively in a later video. But I think we've talked at length and we've talked about most of what we wanted to cover. I like to keep the MGTOW talks focused. I don't like to meander about too much, and I think Coltaine agrees with me on that. So, yeah, we're going to wrap it up here. I hope you enjoyed this. And a little spoiler warning, I may be talking to High Lord Teal Deer very soon. I hope so. If the gods favor us, it will come to pass, and I will be featuring him on a MGTOW talk. So, Zeus willing, that shall happen. And as always, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we look forward to reading your comments. Anything else, Coltaine?
No, that's pretty much all covered, I think.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks for watching as always, and may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye.